Hey guys, in today's video, I want to talk about how to deploy a Django app to Heroku. So I already have an app set up and running just to show you it here. This is from a previous video that I made here, and it's just a way to get the weather for a particular city. So you insert a name of a city, let's say Los Angeles, and you can see the name of the city. So I'm not really concerned about showing you how this works. If you want to see how I built it, you can go watch the weather app video. I'll link it in the description below. But for this video, I just wanted to deploy this to Heroku so other people can see it. Right now, it's on my local machine. So before you can get into doing this, first you need to have an Heroku account. You also need to have the Heroku command line client set up, and I'll post a link in the description below how to get that set up. And also know that when we do this, the repo that you create for this, it should be private because we're going to put a lot of the configuration in the settings file. So because of that, if you put it in a local repo, everybody's going to be able to get your configuration information. And I don't want to make this video about configuration, so I'm just doing it the easiest way possible and putting it inside the settings.py. But you should look into changing your configuration if you plan to have it either in a public repo or you're going to have multiple people working on your app. Like I said, I just want to focus on Heroku in this video. So I have the app up and running, and I have a Heroku account. So what I want to do now is I want to get this up and running on Heroku. So I'll go to my project and I have it running here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to do Heroku login because I'll need to do that. So this comes from the client that you installed, and you can press any key and it should open up a window in your browser, which is doing here, and you just click login. Since I have a session going, I don't have to put in my credentials. So I can close this, and it is now logged in on the command line. So when I run commands here, it's going to be connected to my account. Next thing I want to do is I want to create a repo for my project. So let's see, I'm going to put the repo in here. So this is where my manage.py is. How you set up the repo can change how everything works. So I recommend just setting up inside of the directory with manage.py. So I'm going to do that now. So git init. And now what I want to do is I simply want to add everything to the repo. So actually not commit yet, git add period, and then git commits. And we'll just call this the first commit. And now I want to create a Heroku app. So you can do that in a couple ways. You can do it on the command line. You can do Heroku create, which will generate a random name for you, or you can specify the name here. But to keep it simple, I'll create a random name. You can also do this in the Heroku app itself on Heroku.com. So I've created it, and I see it's Infinite Earth 16515. So what I can do is I can add the remote for that. So to do this, you do Heroku, not add, but Heroku git :remote, and then we want -a, and then the name of your app. So in my case, Infinite Earth, and then 16515. So I add that. And now that I have that running, I want to start testing the Heroku stuff. So before I even deploy this to Heroku, I want to make sure it works on my local machine through Heroku. So one thing that you have to know when you deploy an app is you can no longer use the development server that comes with the framework. So when you run Python manage.py run server, it's using a development server to do this, but you can't use that when you deploy it. So you have to have a different kind of app server. So the app server that I'm going to use is called Gunicorn. So I can install that through pip. So pip install Gunicorn. And to test this, it's pretty easy. So I can do Gunicorn. And then I just need to specify the location of the WSGI file. So if I look in the weather and I look here, I see a file called WSGI. In it, it just allows me to initialize the app. So I need to specify the location. So it's in the weather directory, and I can do just dot for a file in there, .wsgi, don't need the pi, and it should start at my server. So if I open this link, I should see my app open up, and it should be running. So I'm not using the development server anymore. I'm using Gunicorn. So now that I have that, I can set up a Heroku proc file, and the proc file tells Heroku how to run my app. So it's basically the same command that I just ran. So I'll go back here, and I'm going to create a file called proc file. So capital P ROCFILE, and VS Code recognizes it as a Heroku file. And in it, I need to specify the type of worker. So I want a web worker. And then I just need to tell the web worker what command needs to run to start my app, which is exactly the same as the one I just ran on the command line. So Gunicorn, and then the weather.wsgi. Right, so there are other settings that you can have for this, but I'm going to keep it simple in this video. So once I have that, now I can do something called Heroku local. So if I do Heroku local, it's going to go into this proc file and run it, and then I should be able to see it. So now the URL is different. It's on all zeros. And if I open it up on port 5000, we see the app is running. So now it's on port 5001. Before it was 8001. And we see this one should no longer work. It's going to take a moment to try to connect to the server, and it's going to fail because I have nothing running on port 8000 right now. And I'll close the original one. It's actually going to take a long time, so we'll just come back to it. But now that we see we can run it locally, we want to try to run it on Heroku. So you always want to try to run it locally through Heroku local to make sure everything works first. Otherwise, it's not going to work on the server itself. Like if it doesn't work on your local machine, it won't work on Heroku servers. So what I can do is I can first create a requirements.txt file, because Heroku is going to use the requirements.txt file to figure out what it needs to install. So you can do pip freeze and then requirements.txt. I have my virtual environment open. And then what I can do is I can commit everything again. So git add all and then git commit. And I can just say added proc file and requirements. And now to push this to Heroku, it's pretty easy. I can do git push and then Heroku master. So I'll do that. And it's going to push all the code over to Heroku first. And then Heroku is going to determine what kind of app I'm running. It's a Python app. It's going to install everything in my requirements.txt file. And then it's going to run what's inside the proc file. So once it's done, it's going to tell us, and it's going to give us a URL down at the bottom when it's done. And before we can even get to that point, we see we have our first error. So this error is talking about the static directory. So anytime you push a Django app to Heroku, it needs to run collect static. You can disable collect static, but we'll need it later. And if you have static files in your project, I'll also show you how to run them. This one doesn't have any static files, so I'll have to add one at the end, but I'll do that later. So what we need to do is we need to add in our static root. So if I go to my settings, so settings.py, I have the static URL, but I can also add a static root. So static _ root, and I can take the OS. So OS has already been imported at the top. And I'll join the base directory, which is, the directory that we're in, our project is in, and I'll call it static files. And this is going to be where the static files will be collected into. So basically what happens is when you run the development server, it can pull your static files directly out of the static folder that you have in your apps. But when you deploy it, you have to have all the static files collected into one spot. That's because Django can't serve static files natively. You have to do something to get those static files to work. So typically you would put the static files on like some kind of web server that can serve them directly. But in our case, we're going to use our app server to serve them, which I'll talk about later. But this is just to get past that error that we saw. So now that I have these static roots, I can go ahead and recommit. So added static roots. And then I can push to Heroku master again. And it's going to go through the process of pushing the files and then trying to start up the server again. So let's see what happens. Okay, so now that it has deployed and we see no errors, it gives us a URL. So I can just open this up. And now it opens my app on Heroku. And I can close this. I guess it's not going to load for port 8000, which is fine. But here, we see that on Heroku, I get this error. And it says invalid HTTP host. And the reason is because I didn't specify what the allowed hosts were once I try to run the app in a somewhat production environment. So to do that, just copy the URL for your app and go back to settings. And then you'll see the allowed host list somewhere near the top and just add it as a string. And you'll also want to add your local hosts. So 127.0.0.1. You can also add the word localhost. In my case, I only need 127.0.0.1. And then we can update this again. So added allowed hosts. And we're going to go ahead and push this back to Heroku. Okay, so our app has been deployed again. If I refresh, I can now see it working. So this is no longer on my local machine. It is on Heroku. Everything looks good. I see an error with parts of the page not being secure. I'll fix that in just a moment. But we can see it working. So we see the same cities. If I add a new city, like let's say Miami, and add city, we see Miami was added successfully. So let me fix that error with the insecure part. So if I go to weather, templates, weather, the problem is I'm using HTTP here when I get the images. So I can just add an S on here, and I'll just commit that next time we have to commit. So now what I want to do is I want to run my app using a Postgres database. So SQLite database works on Heroku as you just saw, but the thing about Heroku is the file system isn't permanent like it is on a regular server. So after a while, the file server will be deleted and recreated, even though our app is running. So because a SQLite database is just a file, it's going to delete our SQLite database and recreate it, and that's not what we want. We want a persistent database. So I'm going to use Postgres to get this running. So to use Postgres in the app, first thing you need to do is install the library to interface with it, psychopg2. So I'll install that. And I have an error with the wheel, but it's fine. It's going to install it. And now I want to do pip freeze. So pip freeze requirements.txt again, so it can update with the library that I just installed. Next, what I want to do is I want to modify the configuration for the database. So instead of SQLite here, it's going to be PostgreSQL. And now I need to specify the credentials for the database and the hosts and everything. Well, I already have this. So with Heroku, if I go over to Heroku and refresh the page, I will see my app, Infinite Earth, here. And you can do this on the command line, but I kind of want to show you around the dashboard anyway. And it's going to tell me I have an add-on installed, Heroku Postgres. So these days it installs Postgres automatically for you. In the past it didn't. And if I go to like settings, I can see reveal config values, and I see this string here. So I'll just copy this and I'll bring it into my code so we can see it. And it has the database type, the username, password, it has the host, and it has the name of the database. So these are all generated for me automatically. I can't put this string directly into the configuration, so I have to kind of take out the parts and put them in the configuration directly. I'll give you a link to a library, though, in Django that does this for you automatically. So you can just pass in the string, and then it will determine all the information for you. But in this case, I'm going to do it manually so you can see what's happening. So you have the name of the database. So the name is always at the end after the slash. So this is the name D6EL and then all the rest. So I'll replace SQLite 3 with that. Next, we have a host for the database. And the host is going to be everything after the, let's see, the @ sign. So EC2 and then all the way to .com. So it's hosted on AWS. And I'll put that in there. Next, what I want to do is I want to specify the port, and the port is pretty easy. It is 5432. Then I need the user, and I need the password. So the password is the second part after the colon, and the username is before the colon. So I'll copy the password in, and I copy too much. Copy the password, and then I'll copy the username and put that in there. And now I can get rid of this string because I don't need it anymore. And now I should be able to run the database. So first, let me try this locally. So Heroku local, and let's see what happens. So I'll go to the tab where it's on my local machine. I'll refresh, and we see weather city does not exist. So the reason why this is happening is because the table doesn't actually exist in the database yet. I need to migrate it. So that's easy to do. So Python manage.py migrate, and this is going to generate the tables inside of the database that I just configured. So because it's no longer looking at the SQLite database, it needs to add everything to the Postgres database before I can start using it. So just waiting for this to finish. It's done. And now when I refresh this, and I have to run Heroku local again, Heroku local. So now I'll refresh, and we see it's working. And now we see I don't have any cities because I have a completely new database. So I'll add a new city. Let's say San Francisco. Add that. And we see it gets added. So this is now inside of my Postgres database. And if you're interested in learning more about working with databases, I have a free course on my site. It's called Django Database Essentials. It will help you understand how to do various things within the Django database. So I have quite a few videos on how to do different things. If you are interested in taking this course, it's free. Just go to prettyprinted.com/Django database, and you can take this course for free. I'll also put a link in the description below if you want to take it. So that's prettyprinted.com/Django database. So now that we have this running locally, we want to commit everything. Let's say added database. And now we can do git push Heroku master. Okay, so it should be up and running again. If I go over to the server now, refresh, well, how about let's just do it that way. Now we see San Francisco. So this is the actual Heroku server before it was my local machine. So we see it working. If I add Los Angeles, it should show up. So we now have everything working on the Heroku server. So the last thing I want to do is I want to show you how to handle static files in really the simplest way possible. So first, let me bring in a static file into my project. So let me make a directory. So the weather, no, not the weather, weather, and then static. And then I'll have to make a directory inside of there. So make directory weather, static, and then weather again. Now I want to copy an image that I have. So copy, this is going to be on my desktop. So let's see. I'm copying an image called Smile. Is it on my desktop or is it on my, yeah, it's downloads. So Smile, and then I'm copying it into weather, static, weather. And this is what it looks like. I just made an image in Paint of a smiley face. And what I want to do is I want to display this inside of my app. So I'll go to my template and let's see, template, the weather. To display a static file, you have to use load static at the top. So load static. Next, I need to put it somewhere. I'll just put it at the very top of the body. So I'll use image src equals and then static weather / smile.png and closing % in bracket. And that should be enough. Now, if I run this through manage.py run server and go to port 8000, refresh this. And this is port 5000 actually. This is from Heroku logo. So I'm running on the server for a particular reason. And we see the smiley face. So it's pretty ugly, but it's there. We see the image. And if I ran this through Heroku local, I wouldn't be able to see it. And if I ran this through the Heroku app, I wouldn't be able to see it either. That's because Django can't serve these images outside of the Django development server. You need to use something else. And typically you will put these on a server that is made for serving static files. But if you don't want to do that, you can install something called white noise, and white noise will handle this for you. It will allow Django to serve your static images from the app server, which is Heroku. So to do this, you can install white noise. And then I need to freeze. So pip freeze and then requirements.txt. Then inside of my settings, I have to go to the middleware. Let's see, middleware, and I'm going to add some middleware. So it's going to be white noise.middleware. Then I want to add white noise middleware, capital W, capital N, capital M. And that should be enough. So git add all, git commit added white noise, and then git push Heroku master. All right, then I can go back over to my app and refresh. Well, refresh doesn't work because of the post, but now we see the smiley face is on Heroku. And of course, the last thing you can do once you're done with everything, you know it's working, you can set debug to false, commit it, change debug to false since it's on the server, and then we can push it again. Git push Heroku master because we're done with everything. So that's it. That's how you get your app up and running on Heroku. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions about that, feel free to leave a comment down below. And like I said, if you want to join my Django Database Essentials course, just go to prettyprinted.com/Django database and you can join that course. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.